more to offer. Not trying to be rude to you, Wolf. This guy has much more inside scoop on what's going on with the Chiefs. We're happy to welcome Chris Clark from the Locked On Chiefs podcast that he hosts alongside Ryan Tracy, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
No sweat. First of all, how long have you been covering the Chiefs for? And by the way, full disclosure, I'm a lifelong Broncos fan, so I hope that does not, make a
I feel
major
pity for you.
Really? Come on now. Chiefs.
Oh, come on. You gotta expect that coming from me.
No, I do expect it. I mean, I was kind of like throwing a firecracker into a crowded room when I said that. I admit it. Now, with that said, and this is kind of, I'm already going off script. Cha is one of my all-time favorite football players. And, having him come over to the Broncos, I'm I guess, cautiously optimistic. I mean, I love that he's coming over so I can pull for him, but man, I don't know if he's got anything left in the tank. Even being anti-Chiefs, I pulled for Cha for a long, long time.
Best of luck with that one.
Yeah, thanks. I deserve that. All right, I want to get you started with a little hypothetical question that we've asked a lot of other beat writers. I'll tell you right now, a little bit to my surprise, the answers on this are pretty much straight down the middle. So I'm interested to see what side you're going to come down on. First question is, what would you say is your least favorite football team?
Probably a tie between Denver and Oakland.
Okay, that's fair. I was expecting that. All right, so option number one is you come out tomorrow, you have a minor press conference, you say on your podcast, whatever, you are going to be, from now on, you're denouncing the Chiefs, you're going to be a lifelong Broncos fan, and you drink the Kool-Aid, and you're all in. And this is for life. I mean, you're everything they do is great. You're all in on Trevor Siemian. You think he's the man. Everything else. So that's
a really tough pill to swallow.
No, I hear you. This is option number one. Neither one of these choices is great. I'm warning you. Option number two, you stand at midfield on a football field wearing no protection except one of those leather 1930s football helmets they used to wear, and you let prime Marshawn Lynch get a 15-yard head start and just bowl you over one time as hard as you can. One time. You got to take it, too. You can't try to kind of roll with it or anything. You just got to take it. Which one of those things would be preferable to you?
Marshawn Lynch, without a doubt.
I love that there was not even like a or an I like that you just you were willing to take it. How bad do you think you'd get hurt?
I'd probably get hurt. I got hurt on vacation, so I would guess that I would get hurt. But I will say this: I mean, if you would have given me, the Raiders and Derek Carr, I might have had a little bit of hesitation.
Well, I want it to be your least favorite one. Oh, you mean
Trevor Siemian? Yeah, it's rough.
Yeah, or Trevor Siemian or whoever else whatever other guy they happen to put in there. I mean, you're drinking the Kool-Aid for life. All right, so no hesitation, hit from beast mode. We appreciate you entertaining that question. I'll let the Wolf start off the actual interview now that we know where you come down. When it comes down to emotional pain or physical pain, you're a physical pain guy. All right,
absolutely.
Go ahead,
I can take a lot of pain.
All right,
perfect. So we've been talking about a lot before you came on was Andy Reid and the West Coast offense and the whole scheme and the ins and outs and what we at least understand of it. But we'd love to get your inside perspective, the expert who's seen it for 4 years now with the Chiefs. So before we go into the specific names and their 2017 fantasy prospects, could you just kind of paint us a little picture of Andy Reid's offense, this West Coast scheme? How does he typically use his offensive pieces?
Honestly, I think I can honestly say that it's changed every year, and mainly because he's had different pieces every year. 3 years ago, you didn't have Travis Kelce like you have Travis Kelce right now. You didn't have Tyreek Hill until last year. You had Jamal Charles healthy for a couple of years, and he really used Charles a lot, but Charles couldn't stay healthy, so that didn't end up going anywhere. Jeremy Maclin was very good 2 years ago. Andy Reid is all about matchups and getting players in space where they can be successful and putting players in position to be successful. So really what it comes down to with him is where the matchups going to be that are going to give him the best advantage on offense. And I think that's really something that, could change over the next couple of years with probably Alex Smith having his last year in 2017. The offense could really change under Pat Mahomes. It's just a completely different type of player.
So Pat Mahomes, that's an interesting one. We had that one written down for later, but since you brought him up, How has he looked in, and what would be the big difference there? I'm guessing it has to do with arm strength, but how has he looked so far, and how would you see this offense evolving if and when, and do you see him potentially making any type of starts this year as well?
Not unless the Chiefs are like 2-10.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see him getting any starts unless Kansas City just implodes, which I don't expect. They have too much talent across the board on both sides of the ball, and a very good coach. So I think that they'll be fine. They can sustain a couple of key injuries. I mean, you think about playing without Justin Houston. If Denver loses Von Miller, are they as good as they were?
No.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of what Kansas City's been without for 2 years, and they've been a pretty good defense without him. So I think that's going to be a big key. Is their depth is really helpful to them in that regard. So I really don't see Mahomes playing this year. He might get a couple of snaps in a blowout, but that's maybe all I really see. Unless right now he's a third string quarterback, and I'm okay with that. I was a big Pat Mahomes fan coming into this draft. I watched a bunch of his tape. I watched what he could do. And I think that Kansas City got a fantastic QB that is going to be a lot better than a lot of people give him credit for. And I think he came into a great situation in Kansas City to be able to sit behind Alex Smith. And when you talk about his differences between him and Smith, they're polar opposites when it comes to taking risks. I guess maybe the best way to put it. Pat Mahomes is willing to take a lot more risks than Alex Smith did. You saw that in his college tape. It'll be interesting to see how much that changes going into the pro game, because you have a situation where in college, Pat Mahomes had to go and try to win every game with a defense that was allowing 48 points a game, I think. In Kansas City, he's not going to have to do that. So is that going to give him the ability to maybe not take as many shots? Not necessarily not throw the ball downfield, but not really put the ball in harm's way. If he can learn that from Alex Smith and just toning it down just a little bit, I think he's going to be a fantastic quarterback.
All right, I got a question for you about either one of those guys' main target. Obviously, I want to talk about Tyreek Hill because he's just one of the buzziest names out there. Before I get into him, Tyreek Hill is a guy with obviously tons of real football applications. Also, just a very intriguing fantasy football guy. We do a lot of fantasy football here. Do you play fantasy football at all?
I do.
How many leagues are you in?
Currently 2. I was in 3 or 4 a couple years ago, but I turned it down, especially when I started covering the Chiefs more, because time went that way as opposed to because I'm one of those guys that really likes to get into the minutia of things.
Yeah.
And try to find things, and so trying to be in 4 different leagues was just too time consuming for me.
I'm a 2 or 3
Absolutely.
leagues guy. The Wolf is more like a 7. What are you at? 7, 8, something like that.
I've cut them down. I've scaled back. I'm with you because with the website taken off and whatnot right now, I've been so busy with that. So I've cut it down to only my 4 most important ones. Have you ever taken down a title before?
Oh, multiple.
Oh, there
Awesome.
we go. Okay, good. You're in good
So then this is
company.
going to be good. You're gonna really feel these questions and be able to give us that fantasy insight on them too. That little fantasy spin. So this is fantastic. But yeah, why don't you hit him that with
All
the
right.
Tyreek?
Let me ask you a little bit. I mean, obviously Tyreek Hill scored 12 touchdowns last year, and I think I saw somewhere that he played like 35% of his team snaps, something like that.
Yep.
Now Macklin's gone. Hill seems to be
I hate that move.
Yeah, you hate the Macklin release?
I do.
Well, talk to me about that for a second. I'll get back to Hill.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I hated it because I think Macklin still had something to prove. You got a guy that got married, a month and a half ago, and instead of going on his honeymoon, he was at OTAs.
Mm.
And I understand his wife knows what he does and whatnot. And Andy Reid and Alex Smith were at his wedding, and all the wide receivers were at his wedding, and then a week and a half later he's released, and it's come out since that he was willing to take a pay cut, and they didn't even approach him on it. And I think we actually had a podcast that went out today. We talked to Ben Albright, who has some inside information for Kansas City, and he said that the Macklin deal was the last straw. It was the final straw. That's really what did Dorsey in when it came down to it. So really kind of hate the move, especially considering if you could still have Jeremy Macklin on this offense to give those receivers one more year I think that'd be very beneficial.
What do you think he'll do over in Baltimore? Do you think that's going to be a good fit for him over there?
I think it definitely could be. I think he's a fantastic wide receiver. He's great at running routes. He can take the top off of defense. He's got enough speed to do that. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to have a great year in Baltimore. And with Steve Smith gone, they really needed somebody to be able to stretch the field and be able to be that number one guy that that Joe Flacco can lean on.
By the way, just for the record, I actually did listen to your pod that came out today, and good stuff. And so Macklin being released, which you don't agree with, and that's an interesting take. I think I agree with you. I think he could fit in well in Baltimore. I don't know, but it's interesting. You got the behind the scenes stuff as far as, you're basically, you think from a football playing perspective, it was the wrong move. And just from like being a good guy perspective, it sounds like you think it was even more the wrong move. So,
well, he was a team leader too.
Yeah.
And, you look at wide receivers that I think the eldest wide receiver right now is Albert Wilson. And if he plays more than
name.
Yeah, if he plays more than 20% of the snaps, he's getting way too much playing time, in my opinion. So,
all right, you got to put somebody on the field. Yeah, I hear you though.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, with Macklin being released, Hill becomes the clear number one receiver. I think pretty much everybody would say. We've always been pretty high on him. We had him up at for fantasy, the 17th guy, where most guys had him around 35. We'd love to get your insider kind of scoop on a couple of things. What type of role and usage are you expecting for Hill? Have you been seeing anything in OTAs that's different now that he's unequivocally the top guy? Is he a lock to be out there for every down now? I've heard some reports saying he's going to be out there twice as much. Is he still going to be used creatively like last year, as a wideout and a running back? I mean, I'm asking you tons of questions. What are you seeing for Tyreek Hill?
I was going to see how many questions you're going to ask me.
Nah, look, I almost kept going, but I'll stop there for now.
Honestly, for Tyreek Hill, I think he's going to step into basically what Macklin's role was. He is a different wide receiver in the fact that you would think with his size he'd be a better slot receiver. But that is not really – they did use him in slot some, but that's not what they really used him at. They used him a lot outside more than anything else, and they used him some at running back as well. I do think they will give him some of those running back snaps. I think what you're going to see is he's not going to be the kickoff guy anymore. So I think his touchdowns could actually go down this year just because I don't think he'll be doing kickoffs. I think he'll be doing punt returns. Mm-hmm. But, how many punt returns is he really going to get throughout the season? If he takes one or two back in the first three games, people might just start punting away from him.
Why don't you think he's going to do kickoffs?
Well, it's been said that he's not going to do kickoffs.
That's a good reason.
The reasoning is because he is going to be the number one guy now, or at least one of the top two. Chris Conley, I think, is very underutilized in the Kansas City offense. So I think Conley gives him something that Hill doesn't in Conley's size and his ability to high point the ball and be physical. And not that Hill's not physical, but the body type is completely different. So I think that Hill is going to be a guy that may catch between 8 and 10 touchdowns, maybe more. It really just depends on what Andy Reid's able to scheme up and get him separation, because without a guy like Macklin that's going to be drawing double coverage, you're going to get a safety high over the top with Tyreek Hill, which you should have been anyway. But they were still letting him go last year, and I don't think they're going to make that mistake this year.
So are you expecting him to take a step backwards despite the increased usage, or do you think the increased usage might balance out teams being more prepared and knowing how to scheme for him? What do you kind of expect right now? Because he's one of the buzzier names, and people are pretty widely split on this, whether they're really all in on him, which we're really big fans of him, or if they think he's just just the next gadget player bust type of guy. Where do you stand on that?
I don't think he's a bust at all. I just think he could take a step back in touchdowns because he's not going to get the chances to return kicks, which is really where he excels at returning kicks. And I don't think he's going to get the chances to return punts because I don't think people are going to punt to him. So I think it wouldn't be surprising if he went down in touchdowns this year. I think yards-wise, he could be a close to 1,000-yard receiver. But I just don't know that you're going to get the same touchdown production that you did last year, and I definitely don't think you're going to get the special teams production you got last year if you're in a league that has that type of production for yards on kickoff returns.
How many catches are you saying for him? So close to 1,000 yards or so. How many catches? Because we do our reception leagues here. So
I'd guess somewhere in the range of 60 to, I mean, it could be anywhere from, I would think it'd probably be closer to 75 to 80, 85 maybe. It just, it's going to depend on to see what else Kansas City has that they can develop. With Travis Kelce being the only other weapon on the offense, that most people are going to have to double cover. The question is are they going to be able to, to double cover Hill and double cover Kelce and be successful at it? Kelsey's hard to cover regardless, and Hill is too with his speed and his ability to change direction real quick. So, I could see 75 to 80 catches, next season. It's going to depend on what the other guys are able to do that step up, like, a Chris Conley or maybe an Albert Wilson or a Jehu Chesson or, maybe even a Gavin Escobar if he is successful, because Reed loves to use the 2 tight end set.
Right. Last thing on Hill, just because he, again, is one of the bigger names, but I think a lot of people, I don't get where this comes from, but an argument we see in the fantasy community a lot is that he's just a gadget player, that he's the next Cordarrelle Patterson. He's a guy that you just could only give bubble screens, and he's going to be exposed this year. We personally don't buy this. We see him as a pretty complete receiver. He's good at gaining some separation and seemed pretty capable of a solid route tree, but we want to get your take on that. Do you see him as a pretty complete receiver, or is he more of a gadget player? Could you quell those concerns for us, or are you going to feed into him? What do you see there?
I'm going to mostly quell those concerns. I would say he's more a gadget player now than he will be in 2 years, mainly because I think he's still developing. He was a running back coming out of college that's learning to play wide receiver in the NFL. And he's in a very complex offense for Andy Reid. I do think he's going to have a great year for Kansas City this season, but I do think that his season this year is not going to be anything compared to what it would be in 2 or 3 years, especially with Pat Mahomes taking over and his affinity to throw the ball down the field. I mean, Mahomes' ability to throw the ball down the field almost gives Tyreek Hill, makes Tyreek Hill that much more scary just because of his speed. You can't give him a chance to get behind you because Mahomes will put it there.
All right, so we might be a year away.
We're going to talk a little bit now about the Wolves, one of the Wolves' truly favorite players, and that's Travis Kelce. I'm kidding. He does not care for Travis Kelce. But we cannot deny the guy's talent, and we cannot deny the guy's production. Went over 100 yards in 3 of the 4 games that Macklin was out last year. What are you expecting, just kind of as a broad kind of stroke, out of Travis Kelce in 2017, especially now that Macklin's gone?
Honestly, with Macklin gone, you saw what he did last year. I think he is he's easily a top 2 tight end.
I agree.
I think he's up there I think he's really close to Gronkowski if he's not there with Gronkowski. You can't cover him singly with anybody in the NFL right now. He will overpower corners. He'll run past safeties, run past linebackers. He's a complete tight end when it comes to the passing game, and he's getting better as a blocker. I do think that they're going to have to try to double cover him a lot, and I think that's going to open up things for other guys. But Travis is still going to get his, and I still think he's going to cross 1,000 yards this year, and I think his touchdown production is going to go up too.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually. Go ahead.
I do think that he will get more touchdowns than he has in the previous seasons. I think that they've had other pieces that they maybe felt more comfortable. You look at what Alex Smith has done. He has a comfort zone with certain players, and Jeremy Maclin was one of them. He made throws to Jeremy Maclin he wouldn't make to any other wide receiver. And then, starting towards the end of last year, he started, doing that with Tyreek Hill and Chris Conley a little bit more. But I think that's going to be one of those guys is Travis Kelce is going to get a lot more looks in the red zone, because I think, and deservedly so, he deserves to get more time in the red zone as well.
Yeah, the Wolf, I'm actually a little surprised you let the whole, Kelce and Gronkowski on the same level comment go on without, having steam come out of your ears. But
I had to bite my tongue a little bit. I am a diehard Pats fan. But in all honesty, in terms of just on-the-field ability, Kelce certainly rivals him in terms of the size, speed, freakish, athlete type of thing. It's more just the off-field. I can't stand the guy off the field.
I agree with Chris. I said earlier in the podcast before the interview that I considered him number 2. A lot of people put Jordan Reed above him. I absolutely don't see that. I consider Kelce the second guy behind Gronk. And Kelce's not hurt anywhere near as much as Gronk, so I feel like you could actually even make a case for him. But speaking of injuries, the shoulder surgery, is there anything that you know about that? I mean, is this going to be an issue or a non-issue as far as you can tell?
It's going to be a non-issue. He played through it that last part of the season last year and still had some phenomenal games. I think it's just, they're just taking it easy on him. There's no reason with a star player like that, there's no reason for him to be in OTAs and running, especially when you look at what they have, and it's all young tight ends right now that need the reps and need the time in the offense. So there's no reason he has to be practicing right now. They're going to take it easy on him, and he'll be ready. I think he's supposed to be ready by training camp, but even if he's not, I'm not worried about it unless he's not starting week 1, to be honest.
Yeah, so we've covered a lot of the passing game. So now we want to move our focus to the run game, which actually kind of just relates to the passing game, because something me and Nat talked about a lot earlier is just how much Andy Reid throws to the running backs, from Jamal Charles in Kansas City to Brian Westbrook, Shady McCoy. He just has this deep history of throwing to his running backs a lot. So typically in fantasy, this has produced some really big running back numbers, especially for people who do PPR, half PPR leagues. So we want to really just kind of lock down this situation, if it can be locked down. We have Spencer Ware as the incumbent, but isn't anything too special, does everything decently well, but nothing phenomenal. And then they go out and draft this guy, Kareem Hunt, who we seem to like better as just a talent. And it sounds like, there's lots of reports right now that they're throwing everything at him in OTAs, that he's impressing the coaches and whatnot. So we wanted to get your take. What have you seen in practice? What's this running back situation going to be? Is it a true battle? And how's Kareem Hunt looking?
From everything I've heard, Kareem Hunt's looking great. When it comes to the running back situation, one of the things I did see is that, Spencer Ware's also trying to take a more active role in leadership on the team. I think that's going to be something that's very good for Kansas City moving forward. I'm not going to say he's exceptional at anything necessarily, but I think he's better than average. I think he's a better than average running back. I think he's really on the good side, closer to great when he's healthy. If you looked in what he did early in the season last year when he was actually healthy, he was very, very productive. So I think that's going to be something to watch. I think that he's going to get the bulk of the carries in the beginning of the year, and you'll see Hunt get more action throughout the rest of the season. But I fully expect it to be a committee between those two. I don't think that West is going to be somebody that gets a lot of touches this season. Yeah,
you said the dreaded fantasy word there, the committee.
Oh, yeah, I know.
It's the absolute worst. We can't just have a workhorse. Do you see it being a committee that we can at least kind of figure out, like, where is the touchdown guy, Hunt's the reception guy, or is it going to just be one of those ones that week to week we just have no idea what's going on and it's just tough to trust either of them?
I think it's really going to depend on who they're playing. Ware's running style is extremely punishing. He wants to run over people, and I'm not going to say he's Natron Means, but that's who he reminds me of in style. Because he really likes to take punishment to people and run them over.
Nice Natron Means reference, by the way. I appreciate that.
I used to. I never did like the Chargers, but I love watching him play.
Sure.
Except for when he's playing Kansas City, because he would just seem to bounce off all their defenders. But that's the type of style Ware wants to run with, and so if they have a defense that Kansas City thinks they can use a punishing running back for, I think you could see Ware get a lot of carries and be the one that's going to get the most production. But at the same time, you got to change a pace guy in Kareem Hunt that's very capable in the passing game, and Ware is too now. So you have two running backs, and I think Kansas City is going to be in a good situation. When it comes to fantasy football, they're not going to be in a good situation because people are not going to like them splitting carries and receptions. But I think that's probably the way it's going to end up being for at least this season.
Who's the number 2 wide receiver right now? Conley? What do you think?
Yep. Should be Chris Conley.
Is he any competition there, or you think he's just going to get it?
Well, he was the number 2 when Tyreek Hill and Macklin were there last year, so I can't imagine he's going to have much competition unless Chesing just comes out and plays out of his mind. There's some other young guys. Demarcus Robinson, it sounds like, has stepped up and is making some good strides this year, but I think Conley has shown that he is a good receiver in this league. I just don't think Alex Smith trusts him enough, and he doesn't get the separation that Alex wants to see to get the ball enough.
So will he be a non-factor for fantasy, or is he a guy in the late rounds to kind of throw on that sleeper list and maybe this is the year? Because we love it. I mean, like you've mentioned, the size, the speed combination. He brings an element that nobody else on the Chiefs does in terms of receivers. Is this somebody that could end up being a late round sleeper that pans out, or is it just his game and Alex Smith's game will never mesh?
Well, I'm really afraid it's going to be Alex Smith and his game will never mesh. He could be a guy that maybe, a couple of games in, he starts being more productive. It's really just going to depend on how Kansas City is able to distribute the ball around. You would have to think, if Tyreek Hill gets 80 catches and Kelsey gets 80 catches, the running backs are probably going to split 90 catches or so. So, you're sitting there at almost 250 catches at that point. And Smith threw the ball 350 times, so how are you going to spread that out?
Right.
And Andy Reid, and you're right, Andy Reid loves to throw to the running backs. He almost looks at it as an extension of the run in his version of the West Coast offense. So, with more passes going to the running backs, is Conley going to get more than 50 receptions? Maybe, maybe not. It just depends on, how much they like to go to 2 tight end set or, even the 3 tight end set they tried a couple of times last year.
So speaking of the pass catching back, I'm going to go off script a tiny bit. I know he's not a Chief anymore, but I brought up Jacha at the beginning of the interview. He threw a little shade at me when I said, I loved him to death. You think he's going to do nothing in Denver?
I'm afraid of what he's going to do in Denver, to be honest. I really, I love Jamal Charles. I've always liked Jamal Charles. I'm not going to lie, it really kind of disgusted me when I found out he was a lifelong Bronco fan.
It warmed my heart so much.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
He's so fun to root for.
Yeah, he seems to be a great guy. I really wish it would have worked out differently for him. The question is are his knees going to hold up? Yeah. Kansas City didn't seem to think they were going to. Maybe they will in Denver. I know that he's going to have a huge chip on his shoulder twice a year if he gets the chance to play Kansas City. But the last time he suited up in a Kansas City Denver game, he is partially the reason that Kansas City lost their last divisional game.
Yeah, that's true.
He had 2 fumbles and 2 fumbles in that one game, and that's pretty costly. And don't get me wrong, the last fumble was probably more on the blocking assignments because nobody picked up the guy that. I thought it was a good play call. I thought 2 missed blocks and he's off to the races. But it is what it is, and that's way in the past. I think he's going to have a good season if he's able to stay healthy. But the question is can he stay healthy?
It's a big if, definitely. All right, I just had to ask you that before we got. I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't ask a Chiefs expert what he thought about Jacha.
No, and the other part of it is with his style, you would think he's more of an outside the box type of guy. He likes to run in between the tackles, and that really punishes his body.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's really what it's going to come down to for me is can his body hold up to that punishment that he's going to take running between the tackles? Maybe they use him differently, and he goes mostly outside this year. But that's one of his things he's always done is he's always been that guy that would go in between the tackles even without the body size, and I think that's really started to eat at him over the past couple seasons.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're going to use him. I don't know why, but with Mike McCoy, their offensive coordinator, he used to love Danny Woodhead and whatnot. Mm-hmm. He might make him into that receiving back, that guy that just gets like 60, 70 catches. I don't know. That's how I see him being used, which might be the best way, like you mentioned, because otherwise he'll probably break down quick at his age and his frame, But we'll see. I like him in that role. Hopefully that's how they use him. We'll see.
Let's keep the Jacha love fest going here for a while. This is fantastic. Go ahead, Wolf.
But why don't we just wrap up here with why don't you give us your season prediction? What do you see out of the Chiefs this year? And then just let everybody know what's the best way to connect with you on all the different social medias and whatnot.
Okay. What do I see for Kansas City this year? Right now, the way things sit, I think they should be able to win the AFC West. I think they have the defense that can step in and be as dominant as they have been in the past. And with a healthy Justin Houston and an Eric Berry that's playing all season, I think that defense is somebody that most teams are going to fear. And you got a guy in Marcus Peters that is a phenomenal corner as well. So, they've got guys at every single level, and you got Chris Jones on the defensive line. I think their defense is going to be very good. When it comes to offense, without Jeremy Maclin, it's going to be tough. These young wide receivers, they have to step up, and if they can do that, I think offensively they'll be about where they were last year. The question is what happens if Alex Smith gets hurt? Personally, I don't think they should be putting in Mahomes unless they are absolutely sure he's ready, because I don't really care to see them take that chance of getting him in there before he is ready to play.
Right.
But I think that they should win the AFC West and really be challenging for the AFC Championship game, if not beyond.
They're in a nasty division. It's not a crazy prediction, but man, do you think that's the best division in football?
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I agree.
And the problem is, and this is what just kills me about San Diego. I don't dislike San Diego near as much as I dislike Oakland and Denver, but
that's because why bother?
Well, but if they would have had an offensive line for the past 10 years.
Oh, sure.
There was something that came out today on Pro Football Focus, I think, that said that Phillip Rivers hasn't had a good offensive line for 10 years. And I'm just sitting there going, you got a Hall of Fame quarterback that you're just wasting.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's a fair point.
Absolutely wasting. I would be so frustrated if I was him. To me, they're top to bottom. I think they're the best division in football without a doubt.
Easily.
And yes, it's going to be hard for them to do it. But if you look at what Kansas City did, they haven't lost a AFC West game in 5 games now. The last one they lost was that Denver game where Jamal Charles fumbled twice.
Right.
So almost 2 years.
Well, I got to say, last year watching Justin Houston and Von Miller take turns basically taking the heads off the other team's quarterback was one of the most – that was just amazing defense. It was great to watch. Pretty sure Kansas City came out on top in that game, but I still really appreciated the level of competition. And I'm also with you 100% that's the best division in football. We asked Chris Clark for 20 minutes. He gave us a little over 30. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, man. We hope we can get you back later in the season and see if these predictions hold up.